It's on the news, it's in the papers, it's on TV. What's going on in the Middle East and specifically in Egypt? Mr. Samson, as we look at events unfolding, what's next for Egypt? What is the next step in this process?
You address me directly, so that it is a $1 million question. What's the next step in Egypt? But I guess that at this moment, what Egypt is expected to do is to make some steps to what we call democracy. And democracy, as you know, and as everybody knows, is a very difficult process. So the next step is probably to hold elections. That's something which is a bit unhappy, and the Egyptians obviously are not used to do. I mean, in this way, or in the way we are used to do it here in Europe or in the United States, in the so-called Golden West. But I believe that if the people professed verified Western slogans like freedom, maybe liberty, or democracy, they will simply believe that they can expect a new life and a new system, not only a new regime. And the question is what a new system will bring about. Will it be freedom or liberty or equality for all? I believe that the next issue will be about splitted fractions in Egypt and about different approaches, different opinions. And what can be expected or feared even is simply just fractionizing the opposition, and a big task for the ruling, I don't want to call it class, but for the ruling structure, which at this time is the best organized structure in Egypt, which is the military. So that the next step will be a big question, so to answer your question.
Ms. Khidayer, you spent time there as a diplomat, as a student. When we look at the political spectrum that Mr. Samson spoke of, who do you think in elections is in the driver's seats? What factions there are best positioned to benefit, to gain from elections?
Well, good afternoon. First of all, for the time being, we probably know the political spectrum in Egypt. So we know that there is the National Democratic Party, which has the majority of the seats of the released parliament. Then we have other parties which are really non-significant, which are like the Gammo, the Union Party. Then there is Al-Ghil generation. We have Al-Wafd or New Wafd, New Delegation Party. We have some other small parties which rose some years ago. Misr 2000, Egypt 2000. So these are the parties which are, let's say, people know about them. They have some seats. Some of them have 1 seat or 2 seats. The Gammo has some 6 seats in Majlis Sha'b. Then we have another, let's say it is not a party, they are independent people or independent representatives in the former parliament. So in Majlis Sha'b there was 71 seats for the independents, and it is perceived that these 71 seats, they were represented by some Muslim brothers, because this faction, or which was banned, it was not possible to form a legal party. So that's why they're just trying to find out any place where to be active in the political life. And now is the question, who is going to appear in the new elections? I'm quite optimistic, because I do not think that the people or the Western countries, they think that Muslim Brotherhood, they will gain the majority. I don't think so, because the Brotherhood, they just wanted to take a piece of cake of the today's situation, but the force which came to power now, it is the youth, the Egyptian youth. So this is very important. And approximately some 10 days ago, the Egyptian youth, they try to institutionalize themselves into some organization like the committees, revolutionary committees. And I think that they will be the leading part together with existing parties, because approximately some 20% also of the youth, they were organized in the opposition or the former opposition parties. So they will take part in together with them. There should be a kind of consensus with some representatives of the former ruling or the still ruling NDP party. So it will be the youth spread across the opposition parties together with the NDP, and also definitely there will be a part of Muslim Brotherhood, which will be probably made a normal or legal political party, but I don't think so that they will gain the majority.
Sure, please.
If I can just tag on to that, because the question of fragmentation or fractionalization of an opposition that has previously been viewed strictly in terms of sitting government, led by Mubarak, and radical Islamist opposition, call it what you will, Muslim Brotherhood is the leading voice of that group. It's long defined what the politics in Egypt could conceivably be, and that's really not the case. For too long, having it be a choice between a dictator and radical Islam, that's a false choice. And for the first time, we're going to see people in Egypt of all persuasions, exactly as you said, particularly the youthful groups, who may be across the political spectrum, but they're going to get a chance to speak and actually define the debate. It couldn't be a more exciting time in Egypt. A hard time, but it couldn't be a more exciting time.
Matus, you were on the ground recently in Cairo. You were there on Tahrir Square. You got to talk to some of these youth. Two questions. One, I mean, do they have a leader, this amorphous youth? And two, did you get the sense that the military will accept that leader that emerges from elections? Is the military, after 4 military rulers, are they ready to accept any civilian that emerges from elections?
So first question, no. They have leaders. They were like on the Tahrir, it's a huge square, and there were some corners where people were talking, everyone was listening and arguing, but it was not like one leader on that square. It was a lot of leaders. They were changing one after another. So I don't think they have a real leader. They are against Mubarak, against the regime. They say against torture, but I think they're not sure what they are for, or maybe they know, but there are a lot of groups. So they will have to find their leaders. I think Mohammed El-Baradi is not the leader because he's not accepted by the usual people. He is accepted by the educated people who can speak English, who travel a lot, and who know him. But the usual Egyptian is poor, living in a village, so he doesn't know him because he has no experience with him because he was all the time out of the country. So they will have to find a leader. And if army will accept him, during the protests, army accepted the people. They have told many times that we will do everything you want, and even the elections. So I hope they will. But if I think so, I'm not sure. So I don't know, but I hope they will.
On the theme of youth, there's been much debate, perhaps more in the Western press than elsewhere, but the role of technology, Twitter, Facebook, in organizing specifically these youth that we're talking about. Does anybody have a strong opinion about the role that this technology played in in the revolution? Was it a contributing factor, a strong factor, the only factor? What do we think?
Just put it on, right. Definitely it was a significant factor in this people's revolution, because it was really a people's revolution. We are not going to argue about the term revolution, but it has still a very big impact. Probably we are not speaking about it much in media, because for the time being, the Egyptian youth and families, they are buying shares just to help the Egyptian stock exchange. So every family or every family member is going to buy for 100 Egyptian pounds for any company just to support it. And this is what I like on the Egyptians, because I think that the development there will be, in our view, very democratic. I mean, from the Western point of view, because the Egyptians, they are trying to do all the best they can afford for themselves. So they are just cleaning the pavements, and it is also discussed through Facebook or Twitter or anything. People are in contact, and they are just small groups which are forming some organization, and we still do not know about them, but probably we will heard about them.
I could tell something about Facebook. Yes, it played some role, but I don't think it's a so big role, because even when internet was shut down, there were people on Tahrir. So it wasn't just Facebook. It was usual medias, usual, like, tell someone to go, and so.
Well, as to this modern technology, which is surely a powerful factor in spreading out information, a very quick information. I was not at the time in Cairo or somewhere else in the Arabic world. But I guess that, well, what my colleague said, according to the information I got, the absolute majority of the people, even in Cairo, doesn't have access to the internet, or hasn't been dealt with internet, first. Second, even before the people massed at the main square, the internet was put out, it is shut down, so that well, it's important, but it's not the main factor. The main factor surely is just, how to call it, it's a pressure cooker. There was something in the society which was socially based and which simply was released, maybe by the information, poorly by the information released from neighboring countries, especially from Tunisia. It was like in the Andersen's fairy tale, the king is naked. Maybe, but it's only interpretations, because if you look into the commentaries and into deep analyses of many Middle East commentators, you don't find any common denominator. Generally, everybody knows that the Arab world was caught in a deep corruption problem since years. If you read, for example, the United Nations sponsored book, Development in the Arab or Arabic world, you can see that it's a deep hole of corruption. And these peoples, it is Arabic experts, these people since years have pointed out that this world is ripe for a rebellion. It was the Arabic experts, not the Arabists. The Arabists are a bit less able in analyzing the situations, because the Arabs have the big advantage over the Arabists. And this advantage is very simple. They know a good Arabic, unlike the Arabists. So that simply they could see the danger, the threat, the risk much more acutely than the people observing the situation from outside.
Building on that, was the West caught by surprise? Was this some failure on behalf of Western governments, Western institutions to see these events unfolding?
On that particular one, I would say no. There have been spurs, multiple small incidents that any one of them could have at any point in the last decade or two struck off the match that lit the powder keg that blew up the Middle East, because I quite agree with you that this is not a new phenomenon, what's been going on as far as the conditions that people have been living in. It's been brewing and building up and building up and building up. But it's like what happened in Eastern Europe 2 decades ago. It took something and it caught the fire, it caught the imagination, and whether it was Facebook or simply text messaging on cell phones, that's huge. Any sort of technological advantage that gave people the ability to communicate with themselves when their government or media outlets or whatnot could not provide them internally with the news they were seeking. Satellite television. The news was being piped in from outside. You couldn't shut it down. So it was a ripening of circumstance. And I think, caught by surprise, I think we've all been waiting for the moment. And it was just a question of when that moment would come.
And a lot of the criticism that's floating around out there, specifically of U.S. policy, support for Mubarak for 30 years, close institutional linkages. How do you react to that? How do you respond to the criticism that this was our guy?
There have been 4 dictators in Egypt since the time, 4 military men who have led the country since its inception in 1952, all of them chosen by one means or another by the people of Egypt or a structure in Egypt. None have been chosen from outside. It's our burden, if you will, that as diplomats, we deal with the government that sits. It's not our choice to put someone in power. They are there, however they get there. What we can say is that we consistently, across decades of, as you say, 30 years of rule, have consistently made clear our views, both publicly and privately, to the Egyptian government and to civil society in Egypt. That's one of Secretary Clinton's sort of signature approaches. When she travels, she meets not just with government people, but she also meets with a wide variety of civil society actors, that we had concerns. We raised human rights issues, we raise rights of minorities, rights of women across the Middle East. That's a consistent policy, but it's not on us to go in and choose for the Egyptian people. That's for themselves to choose who leads their country.
Well, the question about failure of intelligence services. Generally, the intelligence services make mistakes. It's a rule, in fact. Or at least they make many mistakes. Not only in case of Egypt, in case of all Middle Eastern countries. Let's remember Iran, 1979, or other countries in the Middle East since then. But I believe that in case of Egypt, we should not speak about morals. We should speak about pragmatism. And I believe, just as seen it from Europe or as seen it from Slovakia, it's hardly to blame the United States for not castigating or for not reprimanding the Egyptian government as to democracy. On one side, the best, not only the United States. Let's remember that the EU has a partnership for Mediterranean since the French presidency. But it's the same approach to these autocracies in North Africa or in the Middle East. But in case of great powers, especially in case of the United States, I believe that pragmatism prevails. It is that pragmatism tells you that you should deal this country from the pragmatic point of view. If there is stability in this country, you should accept it, because stability, even if an autocratic stability one, is better than a democratic chaos. And I believe that's the principle in world politics. On the other side, well, you can blame the United States for supporting the dictator like Hosni Mubarak. On the other side, you could see that the State Department of the United States issued each year very critical remarks as to the status of human rights in Egypt. And the United States-based institution, Freedom House, criticized the Egypt in the same way, giving it the note like the State Department, I believe 6 or 7, the worst one, as to the observance of human rights. So that I would not speak about politics as about morals. It is morals and politics are, according to my view, incompatible. Pragmatism is to prevail, and I believe that even in the case of the EU will welcome all regimes in North Africa which will prefer stability to democracy. Unfortunately, but it's not about morality, it's not about morals, it's about pragmatism.
So, the response from the EU, from the US, from the West, from the East, is it sufficient as these events unfold? As responsible international actors, what is our responsibility, and how do we judge the responses from the different international players?
Well, you look at me, so maybe I should answer it. The response will be a very, very, very flexible one, which means all the countries which are involved in this struggle, in this upheaval, in this rebellion, in this turmoil, in the broader Middle East, because it doesn't engulf only the Arab countries. It has called even Iran. Fortunately for some, so it doesn't mean that only those countries which were supported by the West or by the United States have been hit by the revolutionary wave. It's even an anti-Western country like Iran. It's an anti-Western country like Libya, which were simply brought into this wave of revolutions. I believe that the response of the West will be very pragmatic. But who is the victim number one is not the United States, according to my humble opinion. Just seeing in from Europe, the United States doesn't depend on Middle Eastern oil. It's maybe, I don't know the exact number, maybe 15%. The Bush administration tried to reduce it to 12% dependency on the oil coming from the Middle East. Now it might be about 15%, because it's the slogan. Oil is the player, the actor number one. I don't think that it's that important for the United States. It's more important for the European Union, which simply depends on the oil coming from the Middle East, just up to 50% today. And according to the prognosis by the EU, by the Paris-based Institute for Security Studies, it will be 60% in 15, 20 years. So that the EU depends heavily on the stability in the Middle East. And the empirical evidence shows that the EU is quite able to come to terms with an autocratic, stable government like in Algeria, which simply rules against the principle of electoral democracy. It's a dictator who is stable is better than an Islamist rule who simply doesn't promise any stability and delivery of oil, of course, in the future.
Sure.
Flexible, yes. We need to be flexible. It's not our decision. We're reacting to the decisions that other people are making, but principled. And the approach, regardless of who sits in the corridors of power in any country, the principles that, and I won't presume to speak for others in this group, but the principles with which we approach a foreign government are the rights of self-determination, the rights of people to assemble, the rights of people to practice their religion, their faith, to move forward and have a prosperous existence. So regardless of who comes in, I think that our role as outsiders looking in, as responsible world citizens, is to take at face value the statements that have been made by the Egyptian military, by the revolutionaries themselves, of the future that they see and the future that they want, and by our engagement, diplomatic, culture to culture, hold them to that. We expect you to achieve the goals that you have laid out, not to get stalled along the way. Because the thing, I think I'm optimistic, but the thing that scares me, and this may sound very odd, I think the easy part is over. The hard part is building what it is you hope to have in the future and making it come out right. And come out right is for the people there to determine. But that part, I think someone said it earlier, it's easy to be against something. It's much harder to actually govern and make things move forward.
Just a small thing. I do think we as the West has made a lot of mistake in Egypt by supporting that kind of dictators. I do think so. But what we should do now is nothing. Let them choose. Let them choose who will lead them, and then cooperate with him. But I think if we support anyone, we will change the situation there in a way that people may not want it. So we should do nothing, I think.
And so if the next person leading Egypt is a vice president that comes from the military, we should support that person and work with that person?
If he is elected in free elections, yes.
Well, I just wanted to add that now we are speaking about Hosni Mubarak, that he was a dictator, and there were many dictators. Of course, this is the look of the Europeans and probably of the Westerners in general. But we were supporting him, or the West was supporting him. So, and why? The question is why? We just wanted to have stability in the region. And also the Western countries wanted to have their national interests to be fulfilled. And just, we cannot lie to themselves. It was like it is, yes? And now the situation has ripened. It came into a certain point. And now, from now, we are writing a different history. So we have to adjust to the changes. So then we have to also develop our own opinion and also the reaction of the countries. So if there is somebody arising from the free elections, then we have to accept him. And probably, or it may be even the representative of an army or former NDP. But we are going to speak with him, because he will represent the today's Egypt. Then another thing is that what is important, or who is the loser? Just I mean, from the point of view, U.S. or European Union or Israel. So now probably let's say the worst situation is, I would say, for the Israelis, because they really do not know what can happen, and definitely they just evaluate every minute, and they have to count with many scenarios. And another perspective is European Union, and today we see that David Cameron is touring the Middle East, the Gulf countries, so it is really very important for Britain as a former colonial power, just to show that their interests are in the Middle East. And it means that even he is the prime minister, but he is really quite deep in the problematics of the Middle Eastern countries right now. So it seems that for Britain it is really very important thing just to know what is going to happen in the Middle East, and that the Middle Eastern issue, it is not just a regional issue, but it is a global issue.
Well, I am not eager to be involved in an ideological strife or debate, but I believe it's a bit unfair to blame somebody for not sticking to democratic rules concerning the dictatorships in North Africa, let's say, so in Egypt concretely. Let's say that the war generally, I don't think that the United States are to be blamed, or the EU is to be blamed, or even the UN, who is the organization with the highest mandate, who should bear the heaviest blame for this. But I think that if you look very shortly into the course of the world politics in the last decades, you can see that well, you can blame the United States or the West generally, including the EU, for having supported a certain Hosni Mubarak, who was a dictator. But the United States definitely supported a certain Joseph Stalin during World War II, who was clearly not only a dictator, but a large-scale criminal. The United States supported the Taliban in Afghanistan. They were surely not Democrats. They were Islamists at that time. The United States supported, or the West supported mostly Iraq against Iran since 1979, because they evaluated the threat of the other as the biggest threat. Hitler Germany was the biggest threat. Soviet occupation was the biggest threat since 1979. Iran was a biggest threat as Iraq at that time. And a bigger threat is chaos in Egypt now than a new dictator, let's call him Mubarak II.
I couldn't agree more. You can't look at any one relationship with a country in a vacuum. You simply can't. And relationships are complicated. There's multiple levels, there's multiple interests, and there's the larger strategic interests of any country. China, another very complicated example where we have a massive trade relationship, a financial relationship, a geopolitical relationship, and numerous frequently elucidated human rights concerns, among many other issues. So you've got to weigh the larger concerns, the broader concerns, but that doesn't mean you don't have the hard conversations with whoever it is you're interacting with. That's what responsible countries do. You deal with the situation that you have, you make your strategic calculation, but as friends of Egypt, which the United States is, we had those frank discussions. We would have liked to have seen more progress sooner. Sure, everyone would have. But the way the situation unfolded, to go back to your earlier question, Chase, of whether it's a failure of intelligence or whatnot, situations ripen and people move forward when they do. But relationships with countries, they go on regardless. To isolate someone, to cut them out completely, to just deny relationships with a country altogether, then you have no influence, then you have no communication, then you have no voice. And the perils of that have to be weighed against whatever moral stand you want to take on any given issue.
To build on that, you look at relationships between countries. We have a number of countries in the Middle East. One could argue that don't have any or have negative relationships with Israel. Egypt and Jordan, the only two countries in the Arab League to have recognized Israel. What impact does this instability, let's call it, in Egypt have on the delicate Arab-Israeli talks? Do we think coming out of the crisis in Egypt, it can be a positive thing for the settlement of the Arab-Israeli dispute in Palestine? Negative? We don't know.
First of all, I see this as a problem of Egypt, just Egypt. It's not about Israel. I don't care so much what do they think, because it's about Egyptian, 80 million of Egyptian. The next thing, yes, only Jordan and Egypt has a peace with Israel. But there are other Arab countries without a peace, and they don't fight. So it doesn't mean if they don't have peace, they fight. So I don't think this will have a huge impact. I don't think so.
If I can a bit oppose to my dear colleague from the Daily Sma, I think that if we speak about the upheaval in Egypt, we definitely have to speak not only about the social upheaval, social turmoil in Egypt. We have to speak about regional stability as to terms of peace and stability in this region. And the peace concluded between Egypt and Israel in '79, and later on between PLO and Israel, and Jordan and Israel, is a cornerstone of the Middle East stability and is a cornerstone of European stability in the Mediterranean region. And well, you have pointed out, up to now Israel had only, one cannot call them allies. It was partners in the cold peace, especially Egypt. It was not an ally. It was simply a partner which stuck to the principle and quite openly during the Mubarak regime to the principle of peace. It was cold peace, but it was peace between these two states, bound on special conditions concerning Sinai, concerning the Gaza Strip, and so on and so on. If this peace has been tethered, if the peace has been in danger, then what is in danger is not only the existence of Israel, which is a bit complicated thing today, because just compared to 1948, you don't have some 50 or 550,000 of Israelis. You have 6 million of Jewish Israelis today in a very small, limited area. Most of them very young, because the demography among the Jewish Israelis is very high. But what is in danger is the peace in Mediterranean, which can bring all this region into chaos, which will endanger definitely the EU in the first place.
I agree with my colleague, Mr. Samson, in a way that Mr. Omar Suleiman, who was the head of intelligence, or still is with his power, and he was the main person who was dealing with the Palestinian question. So he really supported the Palestinians, and he was a personality who was balancing the Palestinian and Israeli peace. And now he's not going to be included in this matter, and then there will be question who is going to take his place, whether it will be a person like him or somebody totally else. And what I think that even in Yemen, there was a special situation regarding the question of the Jews, because many people who are still Yemenite, they are Jews. They are of Jewish origin, and even many Jews in today's Israel, they came from Yemen. And even today, or let's say some years ago, you could have seen Jewish people on visit in Yemen. They just do not get normal visa, they just get a visa on a paper, not in the passport, but they enter Yemen, and they used to enter Yemen. And it was Ali Abdullah Saleh, the president of Yemen, who allowed this situation. And the funny thing was, when I visited Yemen, then I've seen people dressed in typical Jewish dress. They appeared, they were just going around the cities and going around the villages, and they didn't care, or they weren't afraid that somebody will attack them. So this approach was still in the today's regime in Yemen. Regarding still the Palestinian Israeli peace, or let's say Arab Israeli peace, I think that in the coming future, I just want to say that we will come to the question of the Golan Heights sooner or later. So there will be press from the new governments, probably of Egypt or some other countries. They will be. I do not want to say that there will be radical regimes, but today we see that also there are some ships going through Suez Canal which were not going through. Yeah, so from 79. So, and today it is possible. So probably there will be some forces, or some forces in the government of these countries, that they will probably push some Arab countries, and even Syria will be a little bit more inspired to ask Israel to draw from the Golan Heights, and the Arab countries, they will support it.
So, I mean, we're talking about Iran going through the Suez Canal, 2 ships yesterday. We're talking about Syria. We're talking about countries that still don't recognize the existence of the State of Israel. We're talking about an issue from 1946, really, and from the first Arab-Israeli War in 1948. 4 wars up through the Camp David peace accords. From the Camp David peace accords, peace, more or less. I mean, horrible events, but peace. Are you saying that this will be the event that ruptures the Arab-Israeli peace?
That it will rupture. Not at all, but the peace will take a different path, probably. This is just this one. And the question is which one, but what I'm saying, that I'm just thinking that probably there will be much more push to withdraw from the Golan Heights.
I agree with the earlier comment that what's going on in Egypt is about Egypt. It's not about anybody really but Egypt. Inside Egypt and inside Yemen, it's about Yemen, and inside each of the countries, it's really focused on their conditions, their unhappiness, their issues with their individual government. The current powers, I don't know what to call them exactly, the government sitting in Egypt now, transitional, call it what you will, have given assurances that they will still continue to work with Israel. And my hope is that that will be sufficient to keep the Israelis and the Palestinians focused on their task, which is not about Egypt, which is not about Jordan, which is not about anybody else, but which is about them. And that's to fulfill the conditions that have been laid out for the two-state solution. Everybody knows what needs to be done. There's nothing new here. But to not be distracted from the task that they have, perhaps the Palestinians, my own personal wish, many Palestinian friends, to see them inspired to hold their leaders accountable in a slightly more democratic way. That would be my wish for them. But I think that, I hope that distraction it sounds trite, but I hope that people can focus on the specific issues, but I don't disagree with you that it will complicate things and that it might, conversations might arise sooner than Israel might wish to deal with them about Golan Heights and other issues.
Regarding the situation now, the destruction of the powers, and with you are saying current powers, yes. Probably it will be not the current powers who will come with this issue. When speaking about Egypt, I do not think so, because they really said that they will stick to the current commitments regarding also Israel. But it will be probably some people. The voices, they will come out of people, out of the masses. And what we've seen in Tunisia, it was that there was a kind of revolution, but then it somehow was calmed down. And then somewhere in a city, there was a riot on a police station. So people, they do not have the discipline which they had before, yeah, because they were just under the pressure. And they now think that they can do anything. So because there is a kind of still chaos, and they think that they just go for something and they will ask some issues. I'm not saying that it will be the powers or the representatives of the states, but they may be some voices, and there already are some voices. We've seen them also in the Tahrir Square. They are coming out and speaking about Israel. I hope so that the peace stays at least as it is today. I hope so, and I wish so.
Not to shift the focus, but today the focus, I think, is on Libya. If we look at the news, if we look at the statements, I've read Gaddafi saying he will execute, he will fight to the last drop of blood. Hundreds are dead already in the streets of Libya. You know, thank goodness in Egypt we didn't have a parallel to that. What is our responsibility as responsible global citizens to the people in Libya today, right now?
I think we should do here something in Libya, not in Egypt. I told do nothing, but our responsibility there is not the same as in Egypt, because we didn't support him, Gaddafi. So I think we should really try to stop it somehow. But talking about it at summits and UN, it doesn't help anything. But I don't know what we should, but I think we really should do something. Not sure what.
Well, looking into the core of the question, I think that we have been caught in a dilemma, of course. We can see that Arabs are killing Arabs and Muslims are killing Muslims, which can be some inspiring for the so-called Islamophobes, who can prove, well, that's what we have expected. On the other side, if it, of course, has brought a danger of instability. But I don't think that we have many options to choose. The option number one, which is not very probable, as I said at the beginning, is a form of reformism striving for democracy, or a democratic reformism, which is, well, a coveted goal. Everybody of us just desires such a course. But it is accompanied by a lot of dangers, by a lot of threats, by a lot of risks. The second danger, which concerns the stability and security, because it's my problem, security, not characteristics of individual Arabic countries. As to security, the big danger is the idea of Arab nationalism. We experienced it in the 50s, in the 60s. It was a bit dangerous for the world and for Europe. But admittedly, there is nothing like an Arab collective today. There is a mosaic of individual Arabic states which probably will never be able, or never say never, which will not be able in the near future to form just such an Arabic collective. But it's a special danger. Maybe the biggest danger which can unify the forces in this part of the world is what we call Islamism, which is the Islamist, not Islamic, but Islamist radicalism, which has proven to be quite effective in some countries, be it Iran or be it some 2-3 Arabic countries. That's the danger for the EU. So the answer to your question is what the West should do. The West should, of course, criticize and prevent violating of human rights and massacres on civilians. That's the command number one. But second, the West should, of course, prevent allowing this part of the world to fall into chaos under the pretext of democratic free play of forces. Because, and we can discuss this later.
Does that imply then that you think the West should intervene to stop human rights abuses in Libya?
The West cannot intervene. It is the only country which can intervene is the United States, which has intervened or is caught up in interventions in 2 countries of the greater Middle East, and the EU cannot intervene. If you mean the military intervention, the so-called humanitarian intervention, the EU doesn't have capabilities to intervene, and not to speak about the political will to intervene militarily, even to prevent abuse of human rights and to prevent massacres. So that the West, if you mean the EU, cannot intervene, and the US will not intervene.
Thank you for not wishing further interventions upon us. We have our plate quite full at the moment. It seems to me that moral suasion is the only tool, because I agree with you, that what's going on in Libya is criminal. A government turns against its own people. I don't know the specifics of it. I think a lot of the data is yet to be confirmed. We're not getting access, journalists aren't getting access to, I think, the true situation because the security is so sketchy. But what is clear is that the government has turned against its own people and has decided that its preservation is more important than the good of the country and the good of the governed, if you will. It seems to me that the most persuasive voices, given that we've taken intervention off the table, would come from the Arab world, from Egypt, from other countries that have weathered at least the initial stages of this discussion with their populations. Why couldn't the government in Libya be persuaded by, if not the UN, because I agree they're probably not going to listen to that, although it is noteworthy that the Security Council unanimously voted on that resolution. I was a little surprised that it was a unanimous vote. But it seems to me that folks in the region have the strongest voice and the strongest case to be made, that there's a discussion to be had there. It doesn't mean all or nothing government in Libya. There might be a compromise way forward. I'm making things up now, but the idea that there at least be a discussion rather than just violence in the streets.
Before I turn to Mr. Shehata and the rest of our audience, I'd like to throw one more at you, specifically our Slovak panelists. You've been through change, conversion from one form of government to democracy in the not so distant past. I'm hopeful, I think we all are, that's what we're seeing in Egypt, in the greater Middle East, in some of these areas. What does Central Europe, what does Slovakia have to offer these countries who are transitioning to a democratic society?
Well, that's a big piece of history. It's, of course, not only the revolutions of 1980-89 in Slovakia or in Central Eastern Europe generally. We can hark back to 1848, to the big revolution in Europe, and to, I don't know what, to 1948, or 1968 is even better, another big revolution in 1989. But let's remember that the revolution of 1848 failed totally, because after 4 years, France returned to monarchy. the revolution of 1968 being carried on by the new left and Maoists and just some unspecified segments of society failed completely. There was no deletion of capitalism, just on the contrary. The revolutions of 1989 were, well, we call it successful today because we had a big example and we had a big neighbor which was stable, which was democratic, and where the institutions were working. This was a big advantage the Arabic world doesn't have at disposal this time. So that, well, I agree there is an analogy between Central Eastern European revolutions of 1989 and the wave of revolutions in the Arab world today. But it's only a slight analogy, it's surely not identity. The lessons learned from Slovakia or from Central Eastern Europe is very simple. Well, get learned to democracy. But we could rely on be Central Europeans. I don't now speak about Central Eastern Europeans because it's a too broad term, but Central Europe had to rely on a history of civic society, a history of democratic institutions, and had neighbors which were democratic, stable, and consolidated. That's not the case of the world we speak about today.
Yeah, exactly, because the Arab countries, they are in totally different situation, and they have totally different mentality and behavior. They have another background, they have another religion, they have another history of the human rights in general. So we can say, yes, so here you are, you can learn from us, but it never can be adopted as it was adopted here. So we can tell them, okay, there was no bloodshed. You can take it as it is, but unfortunately, it won't be applied in this part of the world as we see today. We have to know about the mentality and that even the poverty which is there is really a lot of unemployment, and the people, they live in different social area, in different societies. And another thing is that there is, we can say, a lack of information. So still a lot of people, they do not have any access to internet, as we spoke in the beginning. They do not have access even to newspapers. Many people, they are illiterate. So it is approximately only 2/3 of the Arab people, they are literate. So 1/3, they cannot read and write. So how can we adopt the same measures as they were adopted here?
Mr. Shehata from the Egyptian embassy.
First of all, I want to thank the organizers for holding this important event. I have some thoughts to share about many of the ideas that were put forward. I'll try to make my intervention very, very brief. Now, first, concerning the youth, the role of the youth in the revolution, I don't think it's a matter of whether they had a unified leader or a figurehead on top of them or not. It was very clear from the beginning that all the youth who brought out this revolution had one common goal. I think the common goal is what makes their role very important. All of the Egyptian youth from the very beginning, they had a purpose, and of course, I think Facebook was one of the driving forces. And just to make a correction, there are more than 20 million internet users in Egypt, so it's not a minority. I think around 30% of the Egyptian people have access to internet. Concerning the tabloids and the newspapers, we have more than 2,000 tabloids and newspapers in Egypt. So this is also the source of information is available for all the Egyptian people. So this was also one of the reasons that encouraged the people and highlight and brought to their attention the problems that the country was facing. And this was one of the second driving force besides the availability of the internet. The people had the information available to them. They knew the problems that the country was facing. Now, second of all, the topic of the Muslim Brotherhood was mentioned. Another correction, there were 88 members in the previous parliament, not 71. So which was about 20% of the parliament which ended in the last year. Nobody can undermine the need to contain such a group in the political life. I think the turn of events has proven that we cannot marginalize the Muslim Brotherhood. But again, I think they will definitely be interested in taking part in a political life now that they are no longer a banned group. It was obvious, first of all, I just want to make it clear that from the very beginning of the revolution, the Muslim Brotherhood had no presence on the ground. Even the Egyptian youth, they totally neglected and rejected any slogans pertaining to religion. All the signs, I'm sure all of you were following the signs on the streets of Egypt. The slogans which were previously adopted by the Muslim Brotherhood in the past years did not appear at all in the demonstrations. I'm sure maybe the colleague from SME who was in Cairo, it was very difficult to differentiate a Muslim brother or a normal Egyptian in the masses. The people were united for one purpose, but once again, going back to the Muslim Brotherhood, in the future, they do plan on participating in the political life. It was interesting to know that 2 days ago, one of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood announced on television that they have no objection to a Christian Egyptian running for president. I think this is a clear sign that they are very keen on participating in the political life, and for the Muslim Brotherhood to come out and announce clearly that they can support a Christian Egyptian running for presidency is a sign that we cannot put aside. Now, number 3, the opposition, the role of the opposition and the NDP. I think the turn of events has proved that the NDP is no longer a player in the game. I think the coming period will show and will witness the emergence of many political parties on the political scene in Egypt. Yesterday, a new cabinet was appointed, and it was interesting to know that a very prominent leader from the Weft party has been appointed as Minister of Tourism. And I think tourism is one of, if not, it's the most important sector as far as the economy is concerned. Last year we received 12 million tourists, and I think it's important to have a respectable person in such a position. And I think it also reflects the tendency of the current transitional, between brackets, government to choose a politician from an opposition, a very strong opposition party, to undertake such a I think very crucial role in the coming period. So many things. Now, I just wanted to highlight that there is a clear timetable in the coming period. Tomorrow, a council will finalize some amendments to certain articles in the Constitution. The deadline was tomorrow. We are hopeful that this committee of very prominent constitutional scholars will put forward the amendments tomorrow to the Supreme Council of Armed Forces. The following step is for us to have a referendum on these amendments, which should take place on the 21st of April. It was also announced by the current transitional government and by the Supreme Council that the current government will not see through the coming parliamentary elections. So I think this all shows that there's lots of dynamic. It's a very dynamic process, and at the end of the day, it will be left to the Egyptian people to choose whether it's somebody from the previous military. The ballots will be the ones who decide who comes to power. If the people want somebody from the military, let it be. If it's Baradei or any other player, well, the campaign will be open to anybody to participate. So we have a clear timetable. It should end on the mid of August. The mid of August, the Supreme Council, as it had announced when it took power on the 11th of February, that it will be a 6-month phase. So we are hopeful that we stick to the time commitments. I just want to also just to just mention that seeing the events in the neighboring countries, I think the Egyptian case has only proven that it's very peaceful and exemplary model for transformation. Of course, lives have been lost, and we of course, it's something that we look at with great remorse. But nevertheless, looking back at history in Europe and in other countries and in other parts of the world, this is the only way that people can move forward. There are lives that unfortunately have to be lost, but I think that Egypt can only become better in the future. And of course, what is important is for the international community. I think it's not. I think we have to overcome the concept of pointing fingers at who is to blame for supporting who, because I think the focus should be on the coming period. Now as my colleague from the American Embassy mentioned, the past phase is the easiest part. Now the real work is about to start. So I think it's a time when everybody, I hope I'm not taking too much of the time, but I have some thoughts to put forward. The international community should really support Egypt's case in particular, because I think it will represent a very, very important model for the other countries. The events in neighboring countries, in Libya and in Yemen and other countries, have proven what the worst case scenario if the international community does not ignore the problem. Of course, as far as humanitarian, this is a very different topic, which I prefer not to dwell into. But I think supporting Egypt in the coming phase and encouraging the transformation process will help serve as a model for the other countries in the region. And this agreement, which dates back to more than 130 years ago, is valid till today, and it is the main international mechanism which guarantees safe passage through the Suez Canal. Whether or not such incidents were happening in the past 30 years this is not the basis on which we should analyze the decision of the Egyptian government, the current Egyptian transitional government, and of course on top of which is the Supreme Council for Armed Forces. But as long as there is no direct threat to the national security of the country in which the Suez Canal lies within its own sovereign territory, and as long as this military vessel does not carry any equipment or bombs or any threat, which of course they have proven through documents, then there is no reason why the Egyptian authorities can prevent or should prevent such innocent passage. Taking into consideration that military vessels from the USA and from Israel as well have passed through the same canal in the past, and yet, of course, they were not subject to such attention. I'm not blessing, or I'm not predicting, or I'm not trying to forecast future relations with regards to Iran. This is because, it's anybody who would say so would be giving premature judgments about something which are still to unfold. But nevertheless, concerning this particular incident that we're dealing with, it is in line totally with an international treaty which Egypt, as mentioned by the Supreme Council on the very first day, has to abide to. And this applies to the peace deal with Israel as much as it applies to allowing vessels from countries to pass through its territories, as long as they respect and pose no threat. And at the end of the day, the vessels passed, and I don't think that something extraordinary has happened which changes the spectrum in the region. Thanks a lot, and I'm sorry if I bored you with my intervention. Thank you.
Are there any questions, comments, observations out here?
Hi, my name is Alena Taranova. I'm from Radio Express, and I wanted to ask to the issue of Libya. We were talking about who should act now. From the from inside Libya. We have no validate information or independent information valid through media from Libya. We have to rely on voices coming from inside, from Libyans now. And in big international media, it's quite obvious that people inside feel that it's United States who should act now. Or they are asking personally Barack Obama, Mr. President, to act. If you mentioned that someone from the region should act, who should that be, and what is the idea from the side of United States how to deal with this pressure?
Well, I think to say the word to act, to do something, everybody wants something to be done, but the doing of the something takes you down a whole other road. I think the US and our European and NATO allies could attest to that and wax prolific in an entirely other discussion. What I was referring to when I spoke was because of the difficulty. Nothing's impossible with the right political decisions, but the difficulty of acting, which, I mean, what is the suggestion that we go in and separate the parties and implement a cordon in between? I mean, that's the task of no one individual power. The U.S. doesn't have that ability or right to go in and dictate anybody's particular terms. What I was referring to is the moral suasion. Who can say something that will elicit a response from Libya? And in that sense, as my colleague from Egypt pointed out, the example is there. The example is there right next door in Egypt. A similar background, as you pointed out, the Eastern European or the European example writ large may not have resonance, but when neighbors with whom that particular country has close ties, trade relations, possibly maybe the Italians have some sway, but countries who have that sway need to be engaged and engage that government, engage that leadership, engage that civil society, but particularly the leadership because they're the ones committing the actions, making the attacks, to go in and get them to see that that's not the way forward that's going to lead to any result that anybody wants. There's another example out there, and it's there if they choose to take it. But for someone to go in and act on this, you can't impose that from the outside without taking over an entire country, which is not something I think anyone advocates. I think we're very, very much not there yet.
Starting for the second question, who should react to the events in Libya? I think it's not just, let's agree that there won't be any so-called humanitarian intervention, which includes military instruments. That's excluded. Nobody's interested in a military, we call it in quotation marks, humanitarian intervention. The West can react, of course. The West has leverage, has institutional leverage, as to NATO, it has Mediterranean dialogue. As to the EU, it has partnership for the Mediterranean. But I believe it's only at the level of dialogue. Who should act, first of all, are international organizations which have mandate. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Muammar Gaddafi has been, or was, and I believe he still has been, chairman of the Pan-African Union. If I'm not mistaken, Libya is a member of the revised UN Human Rights Commission, which was recalled, renamed Human Rights Council in 2006. Libya sits in, and if I'm not mistaken, for the third time since 2006, this Human Rights Council adopted about 50 resolutions. 35 of these resolutions criticized Israel. No one of them criticized Libya. This institution, it is UN first, or Pan-African Union, should simply fire the first shot and morally respond to this massacre in Libya.
I think that the leak from Arab states, they excluded Libya today from the. So far is my information.
That's true. Yeah. Today
it's a nice piece of news, but it came too late, as if nobody knew what's going on in Libya since not only years but decades. Well, but I would like to add to respond to His Excellency from Egypt. I sincerely wish you were right in this respect, so that the situation in Egypt is of course not catastrophic. It's not a disaster. There was a revolution just from below, from the masses. The regime was destroyed. I mean, the regime symbolized by the supreme leader, the president. But just drawing the analogy between Central Europe and Egypt, I repeat, there is no identity. There are some analogical features which can be brought into discussion. But at the beginning of the revolution, or at the beginning of the revolutions generally, the situation is not that fragmented. If I compare this to Slovakia, just imagine, November 1989, there was no fragmentation in this country. All wanted the fall of the regime, which happened after 10 days or so. Only after weeks and even months, you could see what we call split in the society and the fragmentation. And after months, you could see that the society turned to be not patriotic, but nationalistic and even chauvinistic. And partial forces simply try to seize power in this country. Maybe it will be just going in another way in Egypt, but that's the way which we experienced here in Central Europe.
I add something to your question regarding Libya. Today is the situation different as it was some 8 years ago when we were speaking about then when U.S. invaded Iraq. So today is the situation different, and I think that U.S. do not dare to intervene into Libyans' affairs, because I think that the Libyans, they should clean it between themselves. So this is their internal situation, and it is really the UN and some other international organization which are in the eyes even of the Colonel Gaddafi something worth, because they have to do something, and even himself, he has bad remembrances on the U.S. attacks on Libya. So that's why this cannot happen once more, because it won't. It will just. I don't think so. This will happen anyway, and it wouldn't be a good choice of yours, and definitely they won't go for it.
Hello, I would like to ask the Slovak participant. I read some articles some days ago that some people from Egypt, they ask financial support from EU, and the money that they already owe to the EU to make any support. Do you think the Slovakia as a participant of the EU will help them, or individually as a country they will provide any financial support to Egypt?
Financial support do you mean? You mean regarding Libya, or which country?
Because
Libya? You are speaking about Libya,
no,
or which
about
country?
Egypt.
Sorry?
Egypt.
Egypt. Actually, I don't know.
Sorry, as to me, I don't know about this help, but I can imagine that the EU, what else should the EU do as to offer financial help? And I believe that Slovakia, just in the framework of solidarity within the EU foreign policy, which is not working at all generally, but it's a project which should work, that Slovakia definitely should take part in this, because it's just a sign of cohesiveness of the EU. But openly speaking, frankly speaking, I don't know about this help.
If you think, if the EU will provide any help, or in the financial meaning, you think Slovakia will support it?
Definitely.
And I can say that the U.S. has redirected assistance to towards goals that are being identified by the transitional government in Egypt, because I think that's what friends do. When a country needs help, you reach out and you say, what can we do? And I can't imagine that the EU is not doing the same thing, and individual member states wouldn't subscribe to that. But again, I have no direct knowledge of what the Slovakia or the EU is doing.
No, I'm asking particularly because last time in Greece they didn't provide the help. That's why I'm asking exactly for Slovakia. Because last time they were not willing to help Greece in the similar way.
Yeah, but it is a totally different question. When you are speaking about the financial help, there was also a question, financial help of European Union to Libya, just to stop the immigrants from Africa. But now we will see how will it turn out, because really then we've seen one week ago from Tunisia that there are many ships coming to Italy, etc. So we will see how it looks. But this help should have been given to Libya just to stop the immigrants from Africa.
I'm speaking about Egypt because they say that the tourism is now destroyed because of all these events. So they ask for this support now.
As for me, I do not know about this initiative from European Union. No idea.
As to Greece, Greece was not in a situation of a humanitarian catastrophe or on the brink of a civil war as Egypt is. And Greece is not that important for the security of the EU as Egypt is. So that even if the help comes from the EU, I believe it will be marginal. It will be only a rhetorical sign. It will not help quite substantially to Egypt, but it will look quite good.
I think it's fair to say also that we're not really analogous situations. You're talking about an argument within the EU about financial mechanisms for support for member states versus a foreign policy issue in Egypt.
But definitely the Egyptians themselves, they will do their best just to revive the tourism, because it is in their own interest, and they do realize it, they know about it, and they are just doing everything what they can do, although the tourism for this year probably it's over. Yes.
No, it's fine. I'm comfortable, thank you. Now, I just want to say that as far as the support that Egypt is seeking, I think it's more moral support. I think the moral support is priceless at such times. This will indirectly support Egypt economically. Now, to explain this, what Egypt has been asking its partners, European partners, and of course in the USA in the past few days after things calm down in Egypt, is to readdress the travel advisories, for example, for their citizens. Many of the European countries have now softened a bit the travel advisories. Slovakia, in particular, which I think involves us most. From the 4th of March, the tourist groups will start to travel once again to Egypt. 2.5% of the Slovak population travels to Egypt every year. Last year in 2009, the last numbers were 160,000 Slovak tourists to Egypt, compared to 12 million tourists who visited Egypt in 2009. So I think what matters is that the Europeans understand and our partners understand that Egypt is really progressing forward and is really keen and sincere to pass this transformation phase and then go back once again into a civil state and have a civil ruler, and the military does not plan whatsoever to carry on in its current role. So it's not a matter. I don't think we are targeting financial aid per se. This is not what Egypt is asking, and our foreign minister, I think he made it clear. I think it was the day before yesterday that we are not asking for help. I know that yesterday, I think one of the European countries, I'm not sure whether it's the UK or France, but for example, it announced that it's cancelling the debts. Well, this is of course something that we appreciate very much. It's a unilateral step. It's an individual initiative from one European country. which translates its support into numbers, which takes off the burden of the Egyptian economy. I think in the coming phase, the most important thing is to bring the Egyptian economy back on its feet, and of course this will happen with the support of our partners. Madam Ashton visited Egypt. The Italian foreign minister visited Egypt. Ambassador Burns was in Cairo. Yeah. So now we are open to discussion with all the partners, and we are of course listening to the advice. I think this is what's most important. It's moral support through advice. I think we have learned from the lesson that adopting certain encapsulated policies will not move the country forward. The only way is to coordinate and cooperate in a transparent manner. And I think the presence of many people, many independent politicians and members of the opposition parties in the current government will also contribute to bringing in new blood into the political equation, new people with new thoughts. So to answer you once again, it's not a matter of money, but it's a matter of moral and moral support. And as far as Slovakia is concerned, for example, it's important to learn from the experiences it gained in its very, very important transformation process in the past 15 years, 16 years since, now 18 years now since its independence. Slovakia has gone through a lot of progress, and it has managed to join lots of very prominent international and regional organizations, OECD, RIM, and all of them. So transfer of experience is also something which can be translated and transformed and into the Egyptian new model, and I think that's basically it. I mean, it's not about money; it's about sharing experience on how to move forward from the Western countries. Okay, and you just mentioned that Egypt was on the brink of a civil war. I just want to. This is not. I mean, of course, if we apply political theory, every term has certain criteria to apply. This is why in Egypt now we use the term revolution. Revolution is now used in an official manner by the Egyptian officials. But I wouldn't resort to the term civil war, because if some events took place on the 28th of January or the 2nd of February, they do not qualify to be considered civil war acts.
Sir, only just a remark. I surely didn't say that Egypt is on the brink of civil war. Maybe I just formulated it a bit awkwardly. It can be seen from Europe sometimes that Egypt might be on the brink of civil war.
Yeah. Thank you.
Michal Plichta, Euro-Atlantic Center. I share an opinion that if we are talking about political movement in Egypt, we should take into consideration status of minorities in the country. Thanks to His Excellency, who has also mentioned the possible cooperation among Muslim Brotherhood and Christians. I would like to open this topic. And what do you think? Are the minorities winners, or on the other hand, losers of this revolution? Can they obtain any more political rights or better living conditions? Thanks.
I think that on Tahrir there were a lot of minorities, a lot of people from majority, and they were telling we are united, we are together. So I think minorities are winners, also with majority, because all Egyptians are winners, I think. But if they can help, I think they can be given some more rights. But we cannot be sure, because we really don't know who will win the elections. So I cannot predict it, but I think they are winners with the majorities.
Well, I am not an expert in just the internal affairs of Egypt as to minorities, but as to I know from mass media, these not revolution at that time, just at the very beginning of this year, the rebellion was triggered off not in Cairo, it was triggered off in Alexandria and was simply produced by the Coptic minority because there was an attack at a Coptic church and the Copts reacted, rebelled, and were joined at that time by fellow Muslims. And this, after 2 weeks or so, these demonstrations, these upheavals were transferred to Cairo. But as to minorities, if they are winners or losers, I cannot tell now.
Say that the Egyptians in general, whether Muslims or Copts, they are winners. We are not going to speak about losers, because this is what has happened. This is for all the Egyptians. And of course there were many clashes between the Copts and Muslims, but this situation has united them. So this I think is the most important.
Out the panel, and then we'll, I presume, to our Egyptian colleague. My hope would be that the government that emerges from the transition and then into the post-election more permanent government become one that's open and participatory, where everyone has the opportunity to achieve as much as they can and have that government be as representative as possible to whatever system people decide they want to achieve.
Okay, I'm back again. Now, just to make some little cosmetic corrections to the issue which was mentioned. Now, in Egypt, we do not use the term minority. I mean, maybe it's a bit awkward that we don't have official numbers of how many Christian Egyptian Copts are, but we, of course, we refer to the CIA for World Fact Book, and there it's mentioned that we have 10% Copts in Egypt, which is more than 8 million. It's difficult to say that when you have a country with 8 million Christians or Muslims, they are considered a minority. 8 million is definitely by all standards not a minority. This number one. Number two, concerning the event that happened in Alexandria on the eve of the New Year, it was not by any means targeted towards the Christians. The investigations have shown that it was led by a terrorist organization which is connected to Al-Qaeda and came from the Palestinian side. So it was not instigated within the Egyptian society, it was exported from abroad. So just to underline that the event which happened on the 1st of January was by no means targeted towards Christians. And I do not also see any connection between what happened on the 1st of January and the revolution on the 25th of January. They are maybe it can be a topic for some hypothetical discussion, but there is no connection between the two. But nevertheless, I think that the coming phase has to witness, as my colleague mentioned, from the American Embassy, a participation, equal participation from all sectors of the society. If the person who campaigns ends up to be Christian, well, we're more than welcome. Muslim, the same. I mean, everybody should be have equal rights in the practice of political freedoms, and in obtaining a role on the political scene. So I think at the same time that calling them a minority is not a fair judgment, because I mean, even if we look at the former National Council for Human Rights, which I mean 2 days ago they dissolved, but nevertheless it was led by Boutros Ghali, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, and he is an Egyptian Copt, and he was the president of the National Council for Human Rights, and he was himself overseeing the preparations of the yearly reports on the practice of human rights in Egypt, and he's a Copt. In the previous parliament we had several also Egyptian Copts. So their presence in the Egyptian political scene was very obvious. So I just want to also to underline that we exceeded the term minority, because in accordance with the constitution, the rights and obligations of the Egyptian citizens stems from the concept of citizenship. All the citizens have the same rights and are consequently have to abide by the same obligations. So the concept of citizenship is the basis of the rights and obligations of the Egyptian people, not the term minority. Even the Copts themselves, I mean, in Tahrir Square, you mentioned that the minorities were there. I would really put my money on the table if amongst that mass of Egyptians you could identify who was a Copt and who was a Muslim. Only in one case, on Sundays, the Copts were praying during the demonstrations and they were surrounded by the Muslims to protect them. And on Fridays, the Muslims were praying and they were protected by the Copts surrounding them. So I think Fridays and Sundays were the only days where you can identify who is who. And this is because they were standing united for one cause and they were protecting each other. And it even reached the stage that on the 7th of January, when the Copts were celebrating their Christmas in Egypt, the Muslims made a kind of, they surrounded the churches in Egypt because they wanted to fend any possible attack against the churches at that time. So I'm sure my Slovak friend here who was in Cairo would have found it very difficult, and if he wanted to interview Copts to identify them on the spot, unless he approached them directly and asked them whether they're a Copt or they're a Muslim, because you cannot really identify. They are really part of one. We use the term national fabric. National fabric because it's like a shirt or a pullover or a pant. It's all threads in one unified molecule. So once again, this is my little correction.
I can tell you, it was on the Tahrir Square, and there was one of the speakers' corner, and then one man came up and said something, and everyone was shouting, yeah, 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 and I didn't understand Arabic, so I asked the guy next to me, what did he say? And he said that, he said, I am Copt Christian, I am the evidence of unity of people, and all the Arabs and Christians, we are all Egyptians, and we fight for our cause. And I've seen there that they were really united.
I'm glad to hear this. Thank you.
Well, just answering to you, sir, I don't want to disturb the need harmony between Copts and Egyptian Muslims. What I said only is that the first rebellion in this year was produced in Alexandria by the Copts. If there is a continuity and if there is a change of consequences springing from Alexandria to Cairo, I don't know. I even don't know if it was instigated inside the Egyptian society or if it was imported from abroad by Palestinian terrorists. But the beginning, and I believe you can agree with me, was that at the first day of the new year, there was big demonstrations by the Copts, which were joined by the Muslims. And it was a harmony at that time.
I want to thank everybody for being here. Maybe we can continue with discussion, questions, if you have them. We can mingle, but in the interest of keeping to our schedule and allowing those who want to go, thanks so much for being with us, and we hope to see you again.